Feed me, and I will heal your son." The millionaire didn't believe, until the impossible happened before his eyes. The air in La Summit, the city's most exclusive restaurant, hummed with the discreet clink of silver cutlery against bone china and the low murmur of power brokers sealing deals. At the epicenter of this opulent silence sat Andres Salamanca. His presence was a well-known force, a name that made entrepreneurs flinch and judges reconsider. Dressed in an impeccably tailored obsidian dark suit, his face was a mask of impassive granite. He didn't need to smile. The sheer weight of his influence, a chilling blend of absolute authority and profound emptiness radiating from his eyes, was deterrent enough. It repelled sympathy, created a vacuum of deference around his table. Beside him, dwarfed by the grandeur and his father's imposing aura, sat 9-year-old Eduardo. Confined to a wheelchair since the car accident 5 years prior, Eduardo possessed a quiet watchfulness. His eyes, kind yet perpetually waiting for a change that world-renowned specialists, funded by his father's vast fortune, had declared impossible, scanned the room without focus. He listlessly stirred his juice with a straw, a picture of resigned acceptance. Andres tapped an impatient finger on the snowy linen tablecloth, his gaze flicking to the platinum watch on his wrist for the third time in 5 minutes. 3 Michelin-starred chefs, he muttered, the words sharp as flint, and they move like glaciers. An obsequious waiter materialized instantly, sweat beading on his temple despite the restaurant's cool air. "Almost ready, Señor Salamanca. Just a moment more," he stammered, though the delay was negligible. The problem wasn't the food. It was Andres Salamanca, a man constitutionally incapable of tolerating delay, even when the world demanded patience. Eduardo observed the exchange silently. He was accustomed to the almost ceremonial deference shown to his father, the man who bought companies as casually as others bought bread. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath around their table. Then the unexpected sliced through the hushed atmosphere. Descending the grand marble staircase from the main entrance wasn't a socialite or a tycoon, but a girl. Perhaps 9 or 10, she was barefoot, clad in simple worn clothes, her dark hair neatly braided into 2 plaits. Her most striking feature was her eyes, vast, dark pools reflecting a depth and calm utterly alien to this world of curated luxury. She moved with unnerving purpose, weaving between tables laden with rare vintages and starched arrogance, as if traversing an open field, oblivious to the shocked stares and indignant whispers that trailed her. "A girl? Where did she come from?" hissed a woman, clutching her designer purse protectively. "Security," a man whispered urgently to his wife. Waiters hovered, paralyzed between protocol and the sheer absurdity of the intrusion. Yet she walked on, her bare feet whispering almost soundlessly on the polished floor, each step radiating an unspoken challenge to the restaurant's gilded pretensions. She stopped directly before Andres and Eduardo's table. Her gaze settled on them, not with curiosity, but with a profound recognition, as if she already knew their story. Eduardo slowly lifted his eyes. Meeting hers, he felt an inexplicable catch in his breath, a stirring of something wordless yet potent within him. Andres, meanwhile, arched a single, disdainful eyebrow, his mind already formulating the icy dismissal he reserved for unwelcome distractions and underperforming executives. Before he could speak, the girl broke the tense silence. Her voice wasn't loud, yet it cut through the ambient noise with startling clarity and absolute conviction. "Feed me, and I will heal your son." A different kind of silence descended, thick, charged, almost supernatural. It wasn't the polite hush of business lunches or the awkward pause of restrained diners. It was the silence of disbelief so profound it seemed to still the very air. Even the glittering chandeliers overhead seemed to dim in uncertainty. The girl stood unwavering, her dark eyes locked on Andre's, utterly unfazed by the enormity of her statement. Eduardo didn't blink. A fragile, almost painful hope ignited in his gaze, impossible for his father to ignore. Andres, however, felt fury boil within him. A cynical, poisonous smirk twisted his lips. "Is this a joke?" he spat. "Heal my son." "With what? Your grubby little hand." He gestured dismissively at Eduardo's wheelchair. The girl didn't flinch, didn't reply, simply held his gaze. Her stillness infuriated him further. "What do you take this for? Some reality show stunt?" His voice rose, drawing more stares, but he was beyond caring. "Do you think you know more than the finest doctors on the planet?" Eduardo drew a sharp, shallow breath, a flicker of sensation, not pain, but a profound warmth, a subtle pressure, like something dormant, deep within, beginning to stir. His fingers twitched minutely against the armrests. There was no blinding light, no miraculous tremor, only the profound strangeness of the moment and the quiet intensity of the girl's focus. She held her hand there for a few heartbeats, then withdrew it respectfully, stood, and took a step back. "Sometimes," she said softly, her voice clear in the hushed room, "it requires a few minutes." The restaurant collectively recoiled. The brutality of his tone, the utter dismissal, was shocking. The girl didn't argue, didn't cower. She simply lowered her head for a moment, a gesture that seemed less like defeat and more like completion. Then, with the same quiet certainty with which she had arrived, she turned and walked away, disappearing back through the maze of tables. As she left, it felt as if she carried an echo of something potent, leaving an unsettling resonance behind. Andres sank back into his chair, breathing heavily, his fists clenched white-knuckled on the table. Humiliation warred with fury within him. Eduardo remained silent, but his eyes, wide and luminous, were fixed on the doorway she had vanished through, holding onto a spark she had ignited. The waiter finally approached, placing their long-awaited meals with trembling hands. The food, once anticipated, now seemed irrelevant. The luxurious atmosphere was shattered, replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence that spoke of violence, emotional violence, done and witnessed. Andres sat rigid, a warrior without a victory, only the grim knowledge that he had crossed a line, even if he wouldn't admit it. Across the table, Eduardo picked up his fork, but couldn't lift it. His breath hitched, coming faster, shallower, as if something powerful was stirring inside him, confined but insistent. Suddenly, with deliberate slowness, Eduardo placed the fork down. He lowered his hands to rest on his own legs, his brow furrowing in intense concentration. A soft, almost inaudible whisper escaped him. "Papa, ... Andres, still staring at the wall, lost in his own storm, didn't react. "Papa," Eduardo repeated, his voice slightly stronger, threaded with an emotion somewhere between fear and awe. "My legs ... they feel hot." Andres turned his head slowly, first with disbelief, then a flicker of something like dread crossing his stony features. "Hot? What do you mean, hot?" Eduardo touched his own knee, his fingers trembling. He swallowed hard. "I feel ... I really feel them, Papa." The words were fragmented, struggling against years of sensory void. "Tingling. Papa, I feel tingling in my legs. Weak ... but it's there. The world ceased its rotation. The clatter of cutlery, the murmur of voices, the very air. Everything stilled. The impossible words hung between them. Andres recoiled, as if physically struck. Every ounce of his arrogance, his absolute certainty that this was a cruel scam, crumbled to dust at the raw, terrified hope in his son's whisper. He surged to his feet so violently his chair crashed backwards onto the marble floor. He ignored the gasps, the stares. Snatching his jacket, he flung a wad of high-denomination bills onto the table without counting and bolted for the main entrance, shoving past startled patrons. Bursting onto the sun-baked sidewalk, the city's noise assaulted him. "Girl," he roared, desperation shredding his voice. "Girl, where are you?" He scanned frantically, ran to the corner, looked both ways. He dodged traffic, heedless of horns and screeching brakes, sprinting across the road towards the small park opposite. He searched under trees, behind benches, calling her name, a name he didn't even know, pleading, "Please, come back, please." But the bustling street offered no sign of the barefoot girl with the fathomless eyes. Only the mocking echo of his own frantic voice bounced back from the indifferent city walls. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead, but he couldn't stop, driven by a frantic, clawing need. His heart hammered against his ribs, a trapped bird of panic and burgeoning, agonizing regret. The deepest pain wasn't just the shame of his cruelty. It was the devastating realization that the impossible had been within his grasp, offered freely, and he had thrown it away with both hands. He finally stumbled back into the restaurant, defeated. The table was cleared, the food cold and untouched. Eduardo sat by the window, gazing out. Tears welled in his eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. "She's gone, isn't she?" he asked softly, without turning. Andres slumped into his chair, a broken man. He dragged a hand over his face, as if trying to erase the person he had been mere minutes ago. "She was real, son," he choked out, the admission costing him dearly, "and I couldn't see it." No other words were necessary. The crushing weight of a missed miracle filled the space between them. While the world moved on, Andres sank deeper into the pit of remorse he had dug for himself. Eduardo, too, felt the void her absence left, the brief resurgence of sensation, the warmth, the ability to wiggle a toe that had brought a radiant smile to his face, and the words, "Papa, it's warm again," had faded as abruptly as it arrived, leaving his legs numb and lifeless once more. This final withdrawal shattered Andres. "It can't be coincidence," he muttered, pacing his cavernous, empty living room like a caged animal. "She started something, and I threw her out." The thought was a physical agony. He stared, unable to reconcile the vibrant, ambitious woman he'd known with the weary figure before him. "Angelica, what are you doing here? She is your daughter." The truth slammed into him with brutal force. Angelica nodded, a barely perceptible movement. "Yes, and you threw her out of that restaurant like she was garbage, just like you threw me out years ago." Her words landed like physical blows. Angelica crossed her arms, took a deep, shuddering breath. The space for forgiveness felt non-existent, yet the door wasn't entirely closed. Understanding isn't the question, Andres. The question is, are you ready now to hear what you refused to hear then? "Yes," he implored, the word raw, "please." Angelica paused, gathering strength, her gaze fixed on her sleeping daughter. When she spoke, her voice was low, trembling with suppressed pain, but also with a fierce, protective love. "You want to know what happened after you fired me, I'll tell you." She painted a picture of devastating struggle. Job applications rejected the moment her pregnancy showed. Nights in shelters where rats scurried over thin mattresses, giving birth utterly alone in an overcrowded, underfunded hospital ward. Discharged with nowhere to go, she faced the streets with a newborn. Iris grew up on sidewalks, in soup kitchen lines, in places like this. She gestured around the bleak room, her hand brushing her cheek, as if wiping away invisible images. I watched her cough herself raw in the cold because we had no blankets. I saw her faint from hunger, all of it. It started when you decided a pregnant woman was disposable. My productivity dropped. Of course it did. I was building a life, but to you, I was just a liability, a deficit. Andres stared at Iris, sleeping peacefully. The pieces fell into place with humbling clarity. The girl he had reviled wasn't a scammer. She possessed a profound, inexplicable gift. The child he had abandoned to poverty had been saving souls, offering hope to the broken. "I saw her walk into that restaurant," Angelica added softly, like she knew exactly where to go. "That morning, she woke up and said, 'Today we find someone important. I will help.' And she only asked for a plate of food in return," Andres murmured. The simplicity of the request, now a devastating indictment of his own cynicism. "She wasn't asking for payment," Angelica corrected sharply, standing to face him fully, her eyes locking onto his. "She was testing you. She wanted to see what kind of man you were. And even after all that, not knowing you were the one who cast us adrift, she chose to help your son because she carries no hate. She has a purpose. You had a chance to see it, and you threw her out like trash." The accusation hung heavy in the cramped room. Andres stepped forward, a lump of raw emotion constricting his throat. "I know," he choked out. "I know what I did. I ruined everything. But I beg you, ... give me a chance. Not to erase the past, but to build something different." He held out his hands, not in command, but in supplication. "Come with me. This isn't charity. It's not a handout. It's what you deserve. It's what I must do." The imposing gates of Andres Salamanca's mansion swung open that night, the house blazing with light in a way that felt unfamiliar, not just opulent, but somehow expectant. As Angelica and Iris stepped across the threshold into the cavernous foyer, dwarfed by the sheer scale and cold luxury, Andres gestured expansively. "Let me show you to your rooms. ... Iris interrupted him calmly. "I wish to be with Eduardo, alone, in his room." Andres blinked, startled by her quiet authority. After a moment, he simply nodded and pointed the way. "Of course, make yourselves at home. I'll be here if needed." Iris moved through the labyrinthine corridors with an uncanny sense of direction, her bare feet silent on the polished floors. The priceless art, the Persian rugs, the avant-garde furniture, none of it seemed to touch her. She reached Eduardo's room, a spacious haven filled with expensive toys that couldn't fill the void of his isolation. He sat on his bed, staring out at the moonlit gardens. He didn't startle when she entered and closed the door softly behind her. "Hello," she said quietly. "Hello," he replied, a spark of life in his voice that had been absent before. She walked to the bed and sat cross-legged on the floor facing him. "My legs are numb again," he confessed, the hope from the restaurant replaced by familiar despair. "They are only sleeping," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "Sometimes the soul needs a little more time to wake everything inside." She reached out and took his small hands in hers, her grip surprisingly strong. "Do you trust me?" Eduardo nodded without hesitation. Since the moment you looked at me in the restaurant, Iris remained motionless, her concentration absolute, her energy flowing through her hands like a silent current. Eduardo drew a deeper, shuddering breath. His toes, long, inert, curled, a muscle in his calf. He pressed his hands against his own legs, needing to feel the miracle unfolding beneath his skin, tingling so strong now. With a monumental effort, fueled by burgeoning belief, he pressed his feet down against the floor, one foot, then the other. The bed frame creaked softly. He gripped the arms of his wheelchair, knuckles white, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning triumph. He pushed upwards, his body trembling violently, untrusting after years of stillness. And then, unsteadily, miraculously, he stood. "I'm standing," he breathed, the words a prayer of disbelief. "I'm standing." He repeated it, needing to hear the truth. "You are waking," Iris said softly, opening her eyes, a calm smile gracing her face, inside and out. "I merely reminded your body it still remembers how to walk." She released his hands. The door opened slowly. Andres had been waiting outside, respecting her request, but drawn by an unnameable tension. The sight that met him, his son, standing, swaying slightly but undeniably upright, arms outstretched for balance, like a fledgling testing its wings, struck him like a physical blow. All the power, the control, the icy composure evaporated. He crumpled to his knees on the polished floor, a sob tearing from his throat. Not a loud cry, but a deep, shuddering release of pent-up grief, guilt, and overwhelming, incredulous joy. Tears streamed down his face, unchecked. He crawled forward, not as the tycoon, but as a father, utterly undone. He wrapped his arms around Eduardo's legs, then his waist, then pulled him into a crushing embrace, burying his face in his son's shoulder, as if trying to absorb the reality of the miracle through touch. "You're walking," he choked out, the question drenched in wonder. "She woke me up inside, Papa," Eduardo whispered through his own tears, clinging to his father. "She's a superhero." Angelica listened, but her eyes kept drifting to Iris, as if anticipating the true response would come from her daughter. "I don't want just thanks," Andres continued, stopping his pacing, his gaze intense. "I want action. I will give you everything. A proper home, security, financial stability. Angelica, a job worthy of your talents. Iris, the best school, every opportunity. Whatever is within my power, I will do. You deserve the world." The silence that followed was brief but profound. Then Iris spoke. Her voice was clear, sweet, yet